anxiety and mental illness isn't really talked about. It's even hard for me to talk about. It's not something it's not something that I ever really talk about. And I thought that maybe if I did talk about it, it would help. And maybe it would help other people who never talk about it or don't have the courage to talk about it. So what you just saw was something that I tried to film 3 years ago. I filmed it, I watched it over again, and I just couldn't bring myself to edit it and publish it. I felt extremely vulnerable. I didn't want to cry on the internet, but it was just part of a really difficult time in my life. But here I am now, 3 years later, and a lot has changed since then. I'm no longer somebody who's crippled by fear and anxiety, and it took a long time to get here. And honestly, at a point, especially during the point when I was making that video, I didn't think that I could ever get to the point that I'm at now. For many years, I struggled with a severe case of anxiety, which ultimately turned into agoraphobia. What that means is my anxiety became so crippling that I did not want to leave my house. I didn't feel comfortable going places. There was just fear in everything that I did, and it really was taking a huge toll on my life, my relationship with people, and just my overall well-being. Things that were so easy for the majority of people, such as driving to the store in your car, going grocery shopping, visiting your family, your friends, attending events. Normal, everyday things for me were extremely tough. For those that don't fully understand what anxiety is or what it feels like to kind of have panic attacks, the best way that I can explain it is that your brain is triggered by something, and what happens is your body lets out a fight or flight response. You've probably heard this talked about before, but basically that gets your adrenaline pumping, and when your adrenaline's pumping, your body doesn't feel normal. And this isn't just like being nervous to like do a speech or do a test or something like that. It's definitely more extreme than that. Common everyday things can become triggers for you, such as, for me, for example, getting in my car and driving somewhere not even 5 minutes away. The feelings that I would experience were crazy amounts of anxiety. My stomach would start to feel all jumbled. I would get sweaty palms. My heart rate would speed up. It just wasn't a good way to live. And these feelings inside of me were constant. They were every day. The thoughts in my head were constant. What if thoughts? What if I have a panic attack? What if something happens? How would I get out of this situation? If I went somewhere such as a store, a grocery store, I was always looking for an exit in case I had to make a quick break for it. I was constantly always in a hurry. If I had to go somewhere, my body was in like adrenaline mode, and I would just be telling myself in my head, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, get out of here, hurry up. I didn't tell anybody about my anxiety for a really long time. It was something that I've actually struggled with since childhood, it was kind of on and off throughout my life. Since the clip I showed at the beginning of this video, it was an ongoing 5 to 7 years of constant everyday anxiety, which has been the absolute worst. And I never really talked about it to family, friends. I became extremely good at hiding the fact that I was anxious and sort of pushing those feelings down. Even though I was still feeling them, I wouldn't let them show. A lot of my relationships with people suffered, family, friends, that sort of thing. I was constantly making excuses as to why I couldn't do something or attend something or even just drive somewhere to say hello. Before I had to do anything, I was already coming up with excuses in my head as to why I couldn't do something. And it was this sort of thinking that became like a daily thing for me. And it wasn't healthy, and it wasn't a way that I wanted to live. Back then, I could not go grocery shopping. That was kind of one of the main things that changed for me in the beginning, because I had somebody else do all my grocery shopping. I absolutely hated the lineups. When a person has anxiety, the last thing you want is to feel trapped somewhere or stuck somewhere that you can't get out of. That was a big thing for me. If I had no control over a situation where I was going, or if I had to stand somewhere or have an appointment that was under somebody else's time, I did not do well at all. I would avoid it. And avoidance became my way of dealing with my anxiety. So instead of actually facing the problem, dealing with it, and becoming comfortable with an idea, I would just avoid it. And that's probably the number one thing that I want to talk about, because once I stopped avoiding situations and started trying to become comfortable in situations instead, it's kind of when my whole mindset started to change and I actually started to notice some results. While I do to this day still experience mild anxiety about certain things, I can confidently say that I am past my whole severe agoraphobia stage, and I hope that what I share with you guys today, if some of you are having the same problems, I really hope that what I am about to share with you can help you. So before we dive in, let's talk about things that I had tried. So I had tried self-therapy, including like books, anxiety workbooks, tons and tons of research online about anxiety and tools, different techniques that you can do, breathing exercises, CBT exercises, ACT exercises, exposure exercises. I tried so many different techniques that you can find online. This was pretty much my only form of self-therapy at the time, because I was so crippled by this anxiety that I could not get myself to a professional. And the thought of going to a professional at that time was absurd to me. I couldn't even imagine doing it. Just the fear that I had of doctors and medication and that sort of thing, it was too much for me. I tried herbal remedies. I did so much research online about different sort of like natural ways you can reduce anxiety. Nothing worked. Nothing. And I really think that's because there is no solution for anxiety that can be given to you, because the majority of the work is going to come from in here. Everybody's mind is different, and while I do believe that there are certain like chemical imbalances and stuff, which I'll talk about in a second, even still, the majority of the work is going to come from your own strength. So about a year after I had filmed that first clip, I did get myself to a doctor to seek medical professional help. At that point, I was at my lowest. I had really bad thoughts. I didn't honestly, I didn't want to go on living my life that way, and I didn't see an end, and it was a terrible, terrible time. I felt like my world was just like spiraling out of control, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. So I booked myself an appointment, which took far too long to actually get, because I still don't think that medical professionals take mental health as seriously as physical health. And that's kind of a shame, because when you need mental health, you need it like now. Like there's no waiting. I made an appointment. I didn't get my actual appointment for, I think it was 2 months after I made the call, and in that time, that gives you way too much time to sort of change your mind and convince yourself not to go. Thankfully, I decided to go through with it. I went. I was a nervous wreck. I sat there in a corner and talked to a doctor. I had my sunglasses on. I had my jacket on. I was just completely closed off from this whole idea and talking about it and trying to convince myself in my mind during the appointment not to panic. It was after that appointment I got referred to another specialist, and that specialist confirmed that yes, I do have like a severe anxiety disorder. So at least having that confirmed by somebody, I think it kind of helped a little bit, because it kind of gave me an answer. The doctor decided to put me on medication. I was not happy about this, because I'm really not somebody who likes prescriptions and fixing problems with medicine unless absolutely necessary. And at that time, I felt like it was absolutely necessary, because as I said, I was at my lowest point and I needed something to balance out the chemicals in my brain to at least help me get over this hump and help me be able to deal with this mentally. Honestly, I think that medication made it bearable. It definitely is not a cure-all for anxiety or depression, because as I said earlier, most of the work comes from your mind. So having that sort of push to give me a bit more confidence and ability to actually follow through with mental rehabilitation, or whatever you want to call it, it definitely helped. But I do think still that the majority of the work was done on my own, using my own mental abilities and not medication. Basically, you can't rely on a medication to fix a mental problem, because there's still going to be work that you have to do within yourself to make that completely go away. One thing that really, really helped me with overcoming anxiety was thinking of anxiety as simply put, being uncomfortable in certain situations. Once I started thinking of it like that, I started thinking, okay, how can I become comfortable in these uncomfortable situations? So instead of avoiding situations, I started asking myself how I could become comfortable in situations instead. One way that you can do this is to try to add something new to your daily routine. This could be as simple as going to the local coffee shop and grabbing a coffee every day at a certain time, to something more extreme, kind of like what I did, was I purchased another property to renovate and work on. And at that time, that was something I really wanted to do, but I was terrified because I knew that I was going to have different appointments with realtors, insurance people, banking people, construction people, and those thoughts of doing that stuff, it was just so crazy to me, but I did it anyways, because doing that gave me something to add to my daily routine. So I would go from my house to the other house, which is thankfully only like 5 minutes away, and I would go back and forth, go to the hardware store pretty much every single day. And it was definitely nerve-wracking at first, going into stores that I was not comfortable with every day, but as I became used to doing it and doing it over and over again. Something else that I did was I started going for walks around my block. Now there was a time when I could only make it so far around the block before I started to feel really uncomfortable and get anxious feelings. So every single day I would go a little bit further and then come home, and then a little bit further the next day and then come home, until I became comfortable with going around the whole neighborhood and not feeling any anxiety. I think it's important to take baby steps because I know there's a lot of different kinds of therapies out there, that like exposure therapies that just sort of throw you into a situation and think that that's a good way to overcome something. But personally, it could be totally different for you, but I knew for me that would be like the opposite of what I needed, because if I was thrown into a situation that totally terrified me, that would like set off something in my brain as a trigger for a fear in the future, because I would experience those fears and immediately in my brain that would connect with something else, and I would just be afraid, more afraid to do it the next time, if that makes any sense. Hopefully that made sense. So I don't think that throwing yourself into something is a good way to overcome a fear if it's going to plant additional fears in your mind. Does that make sense? So that's why I think that baby steps are really important, and just pushing yourself a little more every single day. It does take time, but once you get there, you'll look back and you'll think, wow, like I never thought that I would be able to do this. And you did. So another thing that you can do is set goals for each new experience or journey. So for the whole grocery shopping thing, I used to just go in, grab a basket, fill it with a couple items, go through the express checkout, in and out as fast as I could. And I started trying to spend more time in the grocery store. So every trip I would take, I would add a few more items to my basket and eventually get out of the express lane, until eventually it became a full cart, to eventually after that spending like an hour in the grocery store and not even being afraid of standing in lineups and stuff like that. So adding a goal to a task, such as like adding another item into your cart, or having a goal that the next time you go shopping you're going to not use the express checkout lane. Just like simple things like that. It may sound completely crazy to people who don't experience anxiety, but I'm telling you that it works. So another thing is to try to do something that you never thought that you could do. There were times when I never thought I would be able to drive 4 to 5 hours in a car. That to me was just like a foreign language. There was no way, never gonna happen. Driving 4 to 5 hours in my car, no, that was just unheard of. So I kind of took that as a challenge, and it just turns out that my boyfriend lives 4 to 5 hours away, and I pushed myself to make the drive. And the first time I did it, I was scared. I still didn't think that I could do it, but I did it. And that feeling afterwards, after you've finally done something that you never thought you could do, it's incredible. And that feeling alone is gonna be what pushes you to do the next thing. So don't let go of that feeling, because it's gonna be what drives you. Another thing that I wanted to do was join the gym, and that was again something I never thought that I could do. The feeling of going into a gym and just the anxiety that it caused, it wasn't something that I believed at the time that I could do. So what did I do? I went to the gym, I signed up for a membership, and I got my butt to the gym. The first time I went, I was probably only there 15-20 minutes, no big deal. And then I just kept going, and I kept extending the time there, and I've had a gym membership now for like 2 years. So something else I want to talk about is anxiety inducing people. I truly believe these people exist. I think that there are certain people that, not to sound too spiritual or kooky or anything, but I truly believe that there are different energies that people let off that kind of heighten your anxiety or make you feel comfortable. People that heightened my anxiety were very high-strung people, people who are dependent on me, people who were worriers themselves, and it made things so much worse for me. And I didn't even recognize at first that these kinds of people were in my life until I really started, I guess, examining the people that I had relationships with and how their energy and what they do and just kind of how they act, their body language, that sort of thing, actually did really affect me. At that time, for that whole 5 to 7 years, I was in a relationship that at the time I thought was great, but looking back and as I kind of came to my realizations about anxiety, I definitely think that this person contributed to a lot of the feelings that I was having. He was very dependent on me. A lot of the time I felt like his mother. I was taking care of myself and him, and it just felt like a lot of weight on my shoulders, and I felt like I had to kind of be this person, not just for myself, but for two people. And that was, now looking back at it now, that was completely detrimental to my mental health. As soon as that relationship ended, things started getting better. It really was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I started to focus on myself. I was allowed to finally focus just on myself and getting back to normal. Now, I know there are some people in your life, friends, family members, that you can't exactly just like get rid of, but you can learn how to deal with them. For example, my mother is a worrier. I never actually realized it before until I started, as I said, like examining people and how they reacted and stuff. And she's just always coming up with these crazy like what if situations and thinking of like kind of the bad things that could happen. And I think that that kind of contributed to how I think. But I mean, she's my mom. I love her to death, but I kind of have to kind of laugh off what she says now and just think like, oh mom, like just, you know, stop worrying, it's fine. And just kind of deal with people in that way. So some people, it's just their nature to be more worrisome and be more high strung. So you just kind of have to accept those people as they are and not let it affect how you think. I think that when you're finally ready to change and to actually truly overcome anxiety, you are going to know it, and you're going to be completely fed up with your life and realize that you can't go on like this. You might feel like giving up on life, but I promise you, if you instead look at what could be instead of what is and gain that strength inside of yourself to just march on and overcome it, you can totally do it. I was a person who never thought that I would be where I am today from where I used to be. Even just looking back at those old videos, I see somebody who is so broken and not confident and doesn't know who she is. And today, I am so proud that I can look back at that and say, wow, I actually did it. I did what I didn't think I could, and I'm living a life now that is so bright, and it's crazy, and I know that you can get there too. I was so worried at one point that my family and friends thought that I was ignoring them. I would make excuses for everything, and it got to a point where I know that some of them thought that I was being selfish, or I just didn't want any part of their lives, which was completely not true. I wanted so badly to be able to go places and attend their events and have fun without thinking consistently about what could happen and what if I have a panic attack, and having those racing thoughts constantly through my head. So it wasn't really until I told them, I opened up about it, I said, this is what's going on in my life and I don't know what to do about it. This is why I've been absent, and this is why I didn't make it to your event. Once I started opening up about it, they started to come around and realize, okay, this is actually, you know, she does want to be a part of this. And that kind of let off a big weight off my shoulders as well, because the thought of disappointing people was a cause for depression in itself. So I've been trying to kind of cover everything in this video. It has been a huge part of my life, and I could go on and on forever. If I've missed anything, please let me know. I will definitely be responding in the comments to anybody who has a question or is struggling with this as well. But I just want to kind of leave you with some tips, short form, that can kind of get you started in your journey to overcoming anxiety or agoraphobia. So number 1, make a list of all of the things that frighten you and that give you anxious feelings. Then try to pinpoint why you think each of those things gives you those anxious feelings. What triggers those feelings? From that list, I want you to pick something and focus on a way that you can become more comfortable with that thing. What can make you more comfortable? Is there something you can bring with you? For example, I used to bring a water bottle with me everywhere. I don't know why. I never really drank it. For some reason, it just kind of felt like a security thing for me, as well as wearing my sunglasses. And that, I don't know why. It's just a security thing. So think about maybe something that can help you feel a bit more secure when you're trying to accomplish these things, and start there. So next, create some goals and take baby steps. As I talked about earlier, you can write these down if you want to. You can make like a weekly little agenda or a chart and just write down what you did, how long you did it for, whatever it is that you're doing, and the next day write down what you can do to push yourself a little bit further. And each day I want you to try to accomplish those things. If you can't, don't stress about it. Just try again the next day. Third, I want you to realize that nothing bad is actually going to happen, and that everything is fabricated in your mind. And all that is happening within your body when you feel that panic come on is your body's natural response to deal with a fearful situation. Your body is creating a lot more adrenaline because it thinks that it's about to sort of get into this fight or flight mode. And it thinks that it has to prepare itself for something, but it doesn't. So I just want you to know that those feelings that you may feel inside of you are normal human feelings. They're just triggered at the wrong times. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're the only person in the world who feels this, because I guarantee you there are millions of other people who've experienced the exact same thing. So I just want you to know that and be aware of it. And when these feelings come, don't avoid them. Avoidance is a way of hiding and pushing those feelings away, which are just bound to come back at a later time because you haven't dealt with them. They're just hibernating if you avoid them. So instead of avoiding them or avoiding situations, deal with it. And even if you're having like a panic attack or anxious feelings or a nervous stomach or something, recognize that, actually think to yourself that this is what's happening, this is what I'm feeling, and it's okay. It's okay. And if something happens, so what? That was another big thing for me. I used to be so afraid of something happening and I didn't know what that something was. A lot of the time I was just afraid of anxiety attacks. So when you're afraid to have an anxiety attack, it's kind of like this vicious circle because you are giving yourself an anxiety attack thinking about being afraid of having an anxiety attack, and it just keeps going on. So I started telling myself, like, if I feel like this, so what? It's gonna pass and I can move on with my day, and anything that does happen, it's temporary. So the other thing was doing something that scares you, but doing it slowly. Choose something that scares you, that you don't think that you'd be able to do, and take baby steps to get there. This could be different for so many people, so I can't give you like exact steps of what you should do, but if you need to, write it down and try to think of ways to overcome it. And as always, how can you become comfortable with the situation? That is so important, and I really want that to stick in your mind. How can you become comfortable? Because you can. You can become comfortable with any situation if you power through it and you do it long enough and it becomes like a second nature to you. Lastly, if you have read about or have done CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, I want to suggest something else. It's called ACT. It's acceptance and commitment therapy. And what that is, instead of CBT, which is sort of trying to distract yourself and give you different breathing techniques and different thoughts to change the way you perceive something, instead of that, ACT is more like you become accepting of it. You know you can't change it, so you accept it. And that is so important when it comes to not avoiding things, because CBT, I find a lot of the time you are still avoiding that main issue. So do some research online if you want to. This is something I did in the very beginning, and it definitely helped me like change my way of thinking, because the idea of accepting things for how they are is so important, and it makes you realize that you can't control everything and you don't have to avoid things. You can accept it and move on. Alright, so I hope those tips help you. So just know that you can do this too. I know you might not think you can right now, but you can. I know you can, and if there's one thing that I learned from this whole thing, it's that there are so many other people who are experiencing the exact same thing as you, so please never think that you're alone. There are always people out there that you can reach out to. You can leave me a comment here. I will gladly respond. Please never feel like you're alone, because it's the worst feeling and you're not. And hopefully this video kind of proves it.